be sure that you heard what he was saying. Because what we don't know, when we don't go look, affects the big picture. Now, I understand the state has these very sensational tidbits that they're giving to you, and they make for great sound bites, they make for great media stories. But at the end of the day, it doesn't bring Benji back, and it really doesn't help you get to the truth. Because in order to get to the truth, you have to go look for the truth. And this is what Brandon saw when he saw this thing. This is what the media is not saying. This is what we need to be focused on. There was a happy family here, and by all indications, as you can see, it was a family unit. Now, are families perfect? No. Not a single one of us is perfect. We have all said or done stuff to others, or even to our own children, that it can be misstated or taken out of context. That does not mean that we did not have or come from a good spot when we said it. When I think about this case, it, to me, is difficult because I can see the care and the love that is there. This is not the typical type of place that you are going to see when you see a place where people are abusive and negligent and don't care. I mean, there are matching beds for the boys. There are posters on the wall. There are matching shirts. This is someone who cares. And all the indicia of what we think of when someone cares is nesting. And you know, we're going to talk about Miranda here in a little bit because it's hard for me to get a grasp on some of the things at the end. And so, as you're going to become aware, and you've heard in the testimony, they had a new baby that was born in January of 2021, and they moved in March of 2021. And she was nursing up all night. I don't know if she had postpartum. She didn't appear to be the type of monster that would do anything to Benji. So we need to take that into consideration, but that doesn't mean that mental health-wise, people can't reach a breaking point, that they can do something they wouldn't normally do. We'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, the state really wanted to talk a lot about the photo on the left, but I want to show you that what we tend to see when we look at all the pictures from April 4th, which is the photo they're focused on, to April 26th of 2021, to July 26th. This is the picture of July 26th. He's going to Little Buddies. This is what he looked like. Healthy appearance. We understand that you're going to see, and you did see, the bruising on his eyes. The reason I played that video for you on July 20th, 2021, is so that you could hear Benji, because he was being asked about every little thing on his body. And through his own words, he was able to tell you what happened. His dad was not sitting there. His dad was not telling him what to do. I disagree with what the state sees when they see that video. What I see when I see that video for the welfare check is that Brandon sits back and lets his children talk. He doesn't overspeak them. He doesn't interrupt them. When Officer Hale says, "Hey, what's that bruise?" It's on this side, on your hip. Benji's like, "Where?" And he's trying to find it. Brandon doesn't interrupt. Brandon doesn't say, well, tell him what you did to yourself there. No, he doesn't do anything. He stands back and he lets Benji talk. And then finally, the child immediately starts saying, after he figures out what they're looking at, he's like, "It's my diaper." And he says it like 8 times. They said they couldn't understand him. I understood him. I don't know, maybe I speak mommese. But I understood what he said. And he was saying diaper from the very beginning. And it was right where his diaper line was. And it made sense. So, nevertheless, the point is that when you also look at that video, you will see that Brandon is acting like a normal parent. If I was speaking to a police officer and my child was asking me to go do something else, and I knew that that police officer needed to speak with me or the child, I wouldn't be running off and distracting the child and going and doing other things. At that point, Brandon was focused on making sure that the child was there and available to speak with the officers as well as to be cooperative. I think it's really important that we not take things out of context, because I believe that we would do the same thing if we were in Brandon's shoes. And the fact that he said, hold on, wait a minute, he didn't say no. He was like, just wait, not right now. He was waiting for that moment to pass. And telling a child no does not mean that you're depriving them of food. Here's the thing. We have, as parents, an obligation when we're working with our kids to try to teach them wrong from right and routines. And we know sometimes more than they do because they don't want to take naps. They don't want, maybe they want to eat something that's not so healthy for them. And in doing that, they eat something that's not healthy for them, then they will not eat the things they actually need to grow healthy and strong. And so there is this balance that has to be met when we work with kids. And I think that it's unreasonable for the state to come in here and act like any time a child is told no, that somehow indicates child abuse. That somehow is some, deprivation of a need. That is not what was going on here. All right, so we have the court charge. We'll go over that you have a legal or statutory duty, that someone who has a legal or statutory duty to act, whether that's as a parent or because you just took care, custody, and control of a child, you do have duties, and you have a duty to provide food and medical care. All right, nobody disagrees with that. What we disagree with is when you have, first, in order to be found guilty of this charge, it would have to be shown that Brandon Cervera intentionally or knowingly caused serious bodily injury to Benji by failing to do something. Now, when you see in the wording, it's going to say by adequate nutrition, by adequate hydration, by proper medical care. That's not the duty, that's just how the state's alleging that the duty was violated, right? So the duty is food and medical care. The problem I have with adequate nutrition is that each and every one of you would agree on what is adequate nutrition, right? Because we disagree on what nutrition is. So when you go back there, I want you to think about what Dr. Lucifer did say. He was like, it's not about the quality, it's about the quantity, right? He was talking about the food. And so that makes more sense that we are judging people by making sure there's food available. And I'm going to explain to you why, when you look at this case, you're going to see that food was available and made available, and that this whole thing about bread that the state is focused on is actually, you're going to see how much bread he was eating in one of these photos. They won't present it to you like that. They'll present it to you to demonize my client because he's saying, don't ask for another whole loaf of bread. The child had just eaten a whole loaf of bread. If I were a parent and my kid had just eaten a whole loaf of bread, I would be also telling my kid, don't ask me for another whole loaf of bread. You just had one, right? But it's taking it out of context. So when we talk about adequate nutrition, I really need you to be careful here because we engage in a slippery slope of what's adequate. The child was not starved. You have heard from multiple experts. You've heard from Dr. Christensen. You've heard from Dr. Gebhard. I mean, this child, while small, he was always small. And that does not make someone starved. Adequate hydration. You heard from Dr. Molina. You can just check that off of your list because she said this child did not die of dehydration. So I don't even know why it's even alleged. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Proper medical care, and you're going to see the term proper in there. But here's the thing, guys. If you go to an ER, your pediatrician, your ENT, you're not going to a quack, you're not going to this healing arch, at that point, you have to be able to rely on the people that you're going to. Otherwise, it is an unreasonable burden on our society to start trying to figure out which doctor is better than another one. When you are taking your child to the doctor, and it's the type of doctor that the doctor you went to told you to go to, you can rest assured that that should be enough for proper medical care if you're following those directives. At the end of this, the state has to prove each one of these beyond a reasonable doubt, and I do not believe they can prove any of them. We just talked about the legal or statutory duty to act, intentionally or knowingly. Now, he has to have intended to cause the harm by the starvation and dehydration and medical care, by failing to do it. Do you see? It's not just that
I'm objecting at this point to misstatement of the law as intentionally or knowingly.
What did I apologize? Intentionally or knowingly. I was not trying to leave out knowingly if I did. But the point here is that you have to intend the result or know that the result would happen, right? And so it's not enough, even if, first off, I don't believe they can prove starvation, dehydration, or lack of proper medical care. But even if they did, you have to go further than that and find that he was doing so intentionally or knowingly so that this child would suffer serious bodily injury. Serious bodily injury creates a substantial risk of death or that of Dr. Molina feeling that or claiming that the child died of starvation, that is a death, right? So that would, if it were in fact that you found that would be a death, would qualify under serious bodily injury. But if the child just died, that alone does not qualify. It has to have been caused by something, right? Like if they're claiming like a starvation or dehydration or the medical care. So if the child passes and he passes for any other medical complication, that doesn't mean you brand someone a criminal and throw them in prison for up to life. That's not what we're here for. You need to be focused on the fact that the serious bodily injury has to relate to the starvation, the dehydration, or the medical care. And we saw no organ failure, we saw no permanent disfigurement, and so I do not believe that those would qualify here. All right, failing to provide, we talked a little bit about that already. Welfare check. All right, so what do we see when we see this picture? Because Officer Taylor, in his body-worn camera that I showed to you, said, here's my SAPD number, keep this number and give it to anyone you go to, because this case number, you'll need it, because anyone who sees this kid would not think, he looked back, and they would think that you have done something. And so you need this SAPD number so that they can reference back to this welfare check where we have talked to the child, we looked at everything, and even though he has the black eyes and the ears going on, that nobody's going to misunderstand that because we have looked into it. And so I found it telling because Officer Taylor was foreshadowing the problems that were about to happen. And the problem started when you have a detective size who does not go back and look at all of the evidence, right? Because if he had listened to little Benji when he was talking, we would not even be here today. We have buccal fat, as you can see. The bruising on the eyes is consistent with him having done it to himself because if you're getting hit, you don't get hit symmetrically where you have bruising on both eyes like this generally. Also, you can see the musculature of Benji's arm. And we also, in the photos that we showed regarding his leg and how it came up, if you'll remember, when they were describing the muscularity of an individual, and we have, it's not concave, right? We have, it's going over. There is a quad muscle there. The quad muscle would have to be gone in order for us to even be at the stage of lethal starvation or serious bodily injury from starvation. And so when you look at these, the photos themselves speak volumes, right? It does speak volumes. It's telling a story. Locks are unlocked. Now, oh my gosh, I'm sure when you leave here, you're probably never going to want to hear the word locks again. We have heard locks a lot. But the reality is that I know as a parent that I've done a lot, maybe thought, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that for a kid. And then when I start to implement it, it just doesn't work. It's not helpful. And you don't go through with it. I'm not saying that they weren't concerned initially, but Benji was able to get in. The fact that they exist does not mean that they are frequently used. But here's the thing, if you have a child who is voraciously eating to the point that you're concerned about them choking and you need to sleep, you're not trying to deprive them of food. You're trying to make sure that you have put on your face mask first, right? When we're in an airplane and they tell you when it drops down, put on yours first and then your child. Well, here's the thing. When you don't get sleep, you can't take care of kids, right? Because you do need to get some sleep. And if you're always up watching and worrying about them, they can get hurt, but you are also hurting the family by not being healthy enough to be able to watch them. So the point is that, just because locks are present does not mean that that's actually keeping a child from food. Generally, when we think, the starvation cases are so rare in the United States that every single person that testified told you they've seen one, two, with the exception of Dr. Gebhardt, okay? But they don't see them because they don't happen that way, because when people are out and about, you would be able to pick out someone who was that starved. You would see the bone. You wouldn't see this curvature. I mean, it would be a bone, you would have a knuckle, and that's what we're talking about when we get to that serious bodily injury. There's food all in the apartment. Clearly, there is no desire or intent to withhold food, and you have 3 other children in the home that are also eating and happy and healthy. So the fact that you have one kid that's struggling a little bit more, but has always struggled, you may not realize it in that moment because you see them as being small always. So there's food. Now we wind up at CHOSA. First the Pearl ER. If you look in the records, I believe they go to the Pearl ER first, and that is for the ear. They go, that is not with the intent from CPS. Then they go to CHOSA, and he's checked out head to toe. It is disingenuous for our government, our state, to sit here and say that, oh, well, they didn't go there on their own accord, and that it's so bad that you need to brand his father a criminal for starving him, when they themselves had him checked out head to toe and found that there was nothing wrong with the nutrition that they felt that they needed to address. And at that point, he was 13.84 pounds. Sorry, kilograms. I apologize about that. This case is a very scary case, because if you think about the precedent it sets, Because if you are doing everything you're being asked to do and you're taking your child and you miss something, man.
I'm going to object to improper.
They were looking for child abuse. It wasn't as if the parent took the child in on their own volition and said, hey, he just has an ear problem. Can you just check the ear? That's not what happened. If this child was in danger and they even mildly suspected it, they had a duty to report and to take action. And they took action. They took action in saying, hey, instead of like, we're going to check you out. We don't find that there's been child abuse. We're not taking the children away. We're going to now refer you to Little Buddies or your pediatrician. Follow up with your pediatrician. Follow up with an ENT. And then they said, look at behavioral specialists as well as a geneticist, none of which has to do with food. Then we go to Little Buddies. Here's what you haven't seen, because I didn't have anyone speak to this, but you can see that in Little Buddies on 7/26/2021, they are informing the pediatrician he was asking for bread and got mad because he didn't get more bread. Stepmom and dad were trying to give other options for food choices. He did not want anything other than bread, and he started throwing tantrums, banging head against the bed. The next morning we found him with his eyes looking like that. I mean, they're talking to them about what they are experiencing. And the state wants you, has implied over and over in the evidence that the parents weren't telling these professionals what was going on. The plan is at the bottom. The plan is for the ear that's ruptured, a decongestant, and consider eardrops. Nothing in that plan said anything about, hey, let's talk about weighing the kid. Little Buddies, Dr. Luis Lopez had seen Benji now twice. He had seen him for his well check in December of 2020, and he saw him here. So they weren't taking him to a different pediatrician. They were trying to continue the care. They're not running, they're not hiding, they're doing everything they're asked for. I don't know what else we can ask from a member of our society. Measurements. Now, this picture was taken August 9th of 2021. He's wearing jeans. The state wanted to make a big deal about, do you wear jeans in September of 20, do you wear jeans in September? And I'm like, I don't know, sometimes you do. I do. I don't like to go around in shorts. You'll never catch me in shorts. But the point is that we don't know when we're measuring these things. And so when you look at even Dr. Christensen's his chart, he took the data that we have. He would agree, everybody agrees that the data that we have is difficult because the heights are crazy. 99 centimeters is actually 39 inches. That's what it converts to. And so my guess is that when you see these centimeters, the reason that they're off is because Benji was probably 38 something, and they just rounded off to the 99 centimeters. They're rounding it up to 39, and when they convert it to the centimeters at the 99 centimeters, now you've got this big jump between 94 centimeters, which may have been 38 and some change, and then you have instead as opposed to the 39. And so you'll go between, like, it'll go from 99 to 94, back up to 99 to 95. But what you can see there, though, is that if you look at it, the trend is that he did grow. He grew from his 4th birthday. So it's really hard. As Dr. Lukhofer said, there is no evidence right now of stunting because we don't have these accurate measurements. That is not Brandon's fault. That's just the facts that we have, okay? And it's no one's intention. Also, as you heard Dr. Gephardt said, we don't know if someone pooped, peed, if they had shoes on or not, the accuracy of the scales. And as I mentioned, the conversion from pounds to kilograms can cause problems. as well as inches to centimeters. Vomiting and urination, loss of fluids. Okay, so Dr. Gebhardt talked about this, that when we have when we've lost fluid, doesn't mean we're dehydrated to the point of death or that we're having serious bodily injury. But when we're dehydrated, if you come into the ER, they know how to calculate how much volume of water they would need to put into your body to put your body back in balance. And that's how he came up with the 0.08 liters. 0.08 liters, he told you, which is the weight of 1 liter bottle of water. It's the 1 liter bottle weighs 1.08 kilograms. And if you add that to the weight that Benji was at the time he passed, he's right back up at that 13.78 kilograms. So it's possible that we are here on something that really had nothing to do with anyone's intent to starve or dehydrate a child. It's just something that the child was experiencing through vomiting, through frequent urination. And so we need to keep that in mind. Let's talk about the August 12th text messages. So here's what they say. I don't want you to call or anything, but man, this boy is out of hand, has been crying all day for bread. I gave him some and he wants all of it. Brandon responds, just give it to you. He can just eat that and that's it, sorry, just chill out. He wants the whole thing. I'm sorry, that blue one that says he wants the whole thing is actually Miranda. He wants the whole thing. And Brandon responds, just give one by one. That sounds reasonable, right? Because we're saying, don't let him choke. Don't let him eat so quickly that he gets choked. And then he don't need to eat dinner. They are fighting over if he eats bread, he won't eat dinner, right? That's the contention that they're having. It does not mean he can't have dinner. It's just that she is saying, no, if he eats the bread, then he won't eat the dinner. And they're getting into this discussion about trying, I guess the frustration or the conflict many of us have on what food should be fed to a child. And then you hear him say, or her say in the text, she doesn't say it, but she's texting it. This is just too much, him getting his way all the time and still not listening. He just finished one loaf, and once more, he's still yelling and crying. And Brandon responds by saying, just give it to him till he throws up, take videos of him. Because if she's so, at this stage, he's saying, not that he wants his child to throw up, but the point is that it captures the very behavior that they are concerned about, that he will eat until the point at which he throws up because he's eating so much, right? It's not that you have to make sure that you're keeping it in the context in which it is written and how they are trying to communicate. I don't even have storage anymore from all the other videos I have of him. And he's like, well, then just delete some. But the point is like, this should not be an argument. If he wants bread, give him bread. If he's eating it so fast that he's making himself throw up, well, then that needs to be documented so that we can show somebody what's going on. All right, catch 22, the bread. Give him the bread, you're a bad parent. Don't give him the bread, you're a bad parent. Because if you look, remember when we talked about quashiorkor and marasmus, and I had those and I wrote them out for you, and I made sure to say, Dr. Lucifer, which one are we talking about? And he said, we're not talking about the one with the big tummy. We're talking about, which is quashiorkor. That's the ones that the kids in Africa had. Do you remember that? He said, we're focused on the marasmus, because in marasmus, it's the lack of getting any food, and you're concaved, right? You don't have anything. I want you to look here. He's just eaten a whole loaf of bread. Look at his distended belly. You know, that's what, they're observing this behavior and can't explain it because we haven't had a child that's been in that situation. but that doesn't mean it wasn't happening, and we can't assume it wasn't happening. Because the only presumption here is a presumption of innocence. And so it is the state's job to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that behavior wasn't going on. And guess what? They've been involved since July 21st of 2021 and had every ability during that time point to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that this kid was being starved. But they didn't do that because all it would have taken would have been to say, hey, let's put him in the hospital, let's give him some food, let's see what's going on. You know? I mean, this isn't something that happened under the radar. And to that end, let's talk about this. Who starts starving their child when CPS and law enforcement get involved? Who does that? If you were going to starve your child, you would have been starving them way ahead of that, right? You don't start this miraculously horrible behavior, I shouldn't say use the word miraculous, but this heinous behavior that they claim when everyone gets involved. And that's when the precipitous drop happens. So it occurred to me, you know, we have a child who has already been struggling, and Miranda may have been onto something. She was saying don't give him the bread because then he doesn't eat other stuff and he doesn't have the nutrients. What if the mere fact of this battle of wills over the bread is that now he's really just getting the bread? That's what he's eating. And to the extent that it's harming him in other ways, because they're now under scrutiny and they're just trying to make sure they're doing their best. They're just like, hey, I don't know what to do, just give him food. You know, so it's kind of those, like I said, it's this catch-22. Give it to him, don't give it to him. You're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. August 13th, Miranda, there is a video that you'll see, and this picture came from that video. And this is the one that the state opened their case with because they think this one line makes their case. It makes for a sensational argument, but it really doesn't make a case. Miranda's saying a whole loaf of bread, and Brandon is saying, he says back, and I'm not going to lie, it's not the most patient voice. I know that looking back, he's not proud of how he talked in this moment, but out of frustration, Miranda's mad at him because he won't withhold the bread. He says, give him the whole loaf of bread. He eats the whole loaf of bread. And the pattern here is he eats a whole loaf of bread. He still cries for more bread. Right? So he's like, see you crying for more bread, bro. Cry for more bread. And I'm going to put your fucking ass in squats. Here's the thing. My husband works in construction field. And he comes home sometimes. And I have to remind him that we're not in the construction world. And we don't use that word as an adverb or adjective, verb, and noun, right, like they do out there. So we can't take people out of their context. I'm not saying that you may not agree with that word that was used, but in the construction world, it's used and it's not even thought of twice. So again, you cannot be held criminally liable for anything when you use that word. It's not something the state of Texas says, if you say this word to your child, you are a criminal. But I understand the context that it sends. But let's look beyond that. What does he also say? Does he say, I'm going to beat your ass? Does he say, you know, I'm going to do something to you physically? No. He's saying, I'm going to have you do squats. Now, he's a young boy. Dads are trying to raise their sons to be, you know, have muscle. He's thinking that he is doing good while also reprimanding a child. So in putting it in context, you can understand that this is not some father that doesn't want to help his son. It's a father who sees the balance of, look, I'm frustrated with you, but I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to try to do something that, while it seems like a punishment to you to get you to change your behavior, it's actually going to help you in the long run. Okay. August 14th, the state has shown the photo on the right over and over, but what they don't do is connect the dots for you, because the rest of the photos on that date, he is sitting at the table eating, and you can see that he's drinking 2 bottles of water. I don't know what else happened that day, I don't have a video camera of that. I don't think that anyone at that point thought that this was going to be in a court of law 3 years later. But that is a fuller picture of what was going on August 14th. We talked about the difference, and you can't tell me that this kid, that they have made this this photo seem like it is just the mirror image of someone who's going to die or has serious bodily injury because of starvation. We can see, as Dr. Gebhard pointed out, that it is not unusual to be able to see your ribs. And this photo, the angle of it, is going to make your lungs come out further, and it's going to make it more distinct. But you can also see that his belly isn't concave, even though he's lifting up. August 16th, middle of the night, and again, Brandon's is in blue. Brandon says on the video, "Why don't you call your mom to come pick you up?" And then Miranda says, okay, again, I've messed up the things. Here's what happens. It says, "Why don't you call your mom to come pick you up?" And then Brandon is upset with her because she's screaming at a fucking kid. That's what he tells her. And he says, "How come you don't scream at Leo like that?" He's calling her out, right? He's calling her out. He's like, "Wait a minute, I sense that there might be something wrong here because you're picking on Benji." And she says, "Leo, I don't cry. Leo doesn't cry every night when people are trying to fucking sleep around here." And he responds, "You're the dumbass that likes to stay up and wait and watch when he gets up." And then I don't know how to, he like makes some sound with his mouth, making fun of her in a way. And then she says, "Now I'm trying to give him a water and he didn't fucking come." So now he's away, like there's water involved. They're not trying to withhold the water. And Brandon says, "Okay, then just fucking close the door, come to the fucking room and close the fucking door, all right? And lay down." I understand you hear the F word a lot in there, but don't lose sight of what the message is. The message is, hey, you're exhausted, you're reeling, you're complicating, you're making this something it shouldn't be. Just lay down and go to sleep. And she says, "Yeah, well, he's waking up the effing boys." And he responds, "So that means for you to scream at him?" And then she says, "Like you don't, he does this every effing night." And then finally he says, "Yeah, but I'm not screaming at him in the middle of the effing night." So here's what I take from that. When you take out the cuss language, is that he's saying, look, and he doesn't know he's being recorded. This is on Miranda's phone, okay? He's not saying, "I know you're beating my kid." He's upset because she just raised her voice at him. So he has no knowledge that Miranda is doing something bad to Benji at this point, and that's important. Miranda's actions, August 17th. Brandon left, and you can see that. Do you remember we have that packet? It's a big packet, Defendant's Exhibit 33. It has the investigative report in there. It has all this information. Brandon left at 6:20 a.m. At 7 a.m., she claims she gets the kids up and takes Brandon to school. Videos of Benji in the car, right? And there's 7 of them. This is weird to me because she's taking videos, and then you can see on there that 5 of them go to trash, and 2 of them she keeps. She says she was sending it to Brandon, but there's no evidence that Brandon ever got that video. So, but that is the video that I took that picture frame from, where you can see what he looked like on the morning 3 or 4 hours before he passes. She claims she gets tacos, which she does. I mean, you see them on the table. She claims that at 9 a.m. she goes to bed with Benji and the boys lying next to her, right? Next to her. But the urine on Benji's bed doesn't make sense. And this has been highly suspicious to me because then she claims she wakes up at 10 a.m. Now maybe she's mistaken about what time she wakes up, but she specifically says 10 a.m. that day. And then 9 911 is not called until an hour later. So, I don't know, the state got into some bruising that's on Benji. Never looked into. Just kind of the bug stopped there. When I asked, Dr. Molina, hey, do you know where this came from, when it came from? No, she doesn't know how it got there, when it got there, but it's there when he goes to the medical examiner. He also has swelling on the brain. I don't know if Miranda did something while she was there and then she snapped and it's like, oh my gosh, because there's this, who waits an hour to get help? And also, how unreasonable is it that you have 3 kids in your house, one of them who is either unresponsive or barely breathing and is in need of urgent medical care, and you think it's a great idea to take your time and take 2 kids, 3 kids, down to the car and haven't even called 911. That is not reasonable to me. And so, if she did something to Benji during that time period, it is not Brandon's fault. He had no way of knowing. But her failure to get medical care is her own failure. It is not his failure. You heard on there that when he became aware of it, he's like, they asked, did your husband call? We don't have those 911 calls. Otherwise, I would have played it for you. But I played it for you hers. And hers were highly, highly suspicious. And the lack of urgency, in my opinion, in which she expresses herself. Why not call 911 to the apartment is my big question. What happened at the apartment? We will never know. I asked Detective Sides, well, you knew that the cameras were going off and you knew that they were linked to Blink. Why not contact them? You have subpoena power. Benji and Brandon Sr. and Brandon Jr. both deserved more than that. Because if something happened in that moment, and it's your child, you want to know whether someone did something. But we were so focused on something other than what's really their job and really important that we don't have that evidence. We don't know what Miranda did, but that video would have captured it. And they didn't preserve it. Tacos and drinks, the food was available, the locks were unlocked, the bruising on Benji's head, did she cause it? The cerebral edema that we talked about, which Dr. Gephardt said would cause diabetes insipidus and cause that urination to come out as much as it did. Failure to investigate the allegations.
Judge, I'm going to object to this point. This is facts, not an evidence.
Suffocation. I'll move on. Suffocation. They could not rule out suffocation. You remember me asking Dr. Molina that, and she just wrote it off. She's like, there's no evidence. There's no evidence because you did not go look. Witness credibility. Julie Center, do I think that she didn't see what she saw? No. I think she absolutely saw what she saw something, but she didn't see it as accurately as she remembers it. But in a traumatic, stressful event, we often misremember. She's saying no stair. She's saying she's coming down the stairs. There's no stairs there. Does that mean that she wasn't there or didn't see it? No, I'm not saying that. But it also has to be considered that maybe Benji wasn't even breathing. When she says, no, I checked and he was breathing at that time, it's possible that he was already non-responsive. We won't know, but you have to keep that in mind. And given the hour delay, that's what causes me concern. Detective Sides, he questions Miranda and Brandon on the same day within hours of Benji passing for like maybe 30 minutes, an hour, and then never ask them another question again. Is that thorough investigation? He gets information after the autopsy that the bruises, why not call him back in there and go, hey, do you know how this happened? Do you know how that happened? When did he last eat? How much did he have? When did he last drink? These are very, very important questions that inquiring minds want to know. But if you don't know that there is an issue, the parents don't. At that point, they're Brandon's distraught. You heard. He was distraught at the hospital. You're asking him about his child like that after his child just passed. He probably wasn't in his right state of mind to even be able to give the details, but nevertheless, you know, the state has all of that evidence. They could have brought that to you. They didn't. The fact that someone can't take or chooses not to take the stand cannot be considered against them, but their statements prior to that to police officers are not prevented from being admitted into evidence. But we can't admit them ourselves because they're considered hearsay when the defense does it. But the state, by law, under the rules of evidence, can get it in. There is no elephant. Remember we started with this and I said, if you think there's an elephant, you're going to find an elephant? Well, Dr. Molina, you know, Detective Size comes to her and he's clipped out these videos of his timeline and what he thinks happens. And so he gets her off on this track of, oh yeah, it might be starvation. Let's go with that. Because here's the thing. The only thing that we've lost here is 2.2 pounds. And remember when we talked about the other case? That is the only other case in 20 years that had starvation. That child had 7.17 kilograms. The child was alive, right? that when he became aware of it, he's like, they asked, did your husband call? We don't have those 911 calls. Otherwise, I would have played it for you. But I played for you hers. And hers were highly, highly suspicious. And the lack of urgency, in my opinion, in which she expresses herself. Why not call 911 to the apartment is my big question. What happened at the apartment? We will never know. I asked Detective Sides, well, you knew that the cameras were going off and you knew that they were linked to Blink. Why not contact them? You have subpoena power. Benji and Brandon Sr. and Brandon Jr. both deserved more than that. Because if something happened in that moment, and it's your child, you want to know whether someone did something. But we were so focused on something other than what's really their job and really important that we don't have that evidence. We don't know what Miranda did, but that video would have captured it. And they didn't pursue it. Tacos and drinks, the food was available, the locks were unlocked, the bruising on Benji's head, did she cause it? The cerebral edema that we talked about, which Dr. Gephardt said would cause diabetes insipidus and cause that urination to come out as much as it did. Failure to investigate the allegations.
Judge, I'm going to object to this point. This is facts, not an evidence.
Suffocation. I'll move on. Suffocation. They could not rule out suffocation. You remember me asking Dr. Molina that, and she just wrote it off. She's like, there's no evidence. There's no evidence because you did not go look. Witness credibility. Julie Center, do I think that she didn't see what she saw? No. I think she absolutely saw what she saw something, but she didn't see it as accurately as she remembers it. But in a traumatic, stressful event, we often misremember. She's saying no stair. I mean, she's saying she's coming down the stairs. There's no stairs there. Does that mean that she wasn't there or didn't see it? No, I'm not saying that. But it also has to be considered that maybe Benji wasn't even breathing. When she says, no, I checked and he was breathing at that time, it's possible that he was already non-responsive. We won't know, but you have to keep that in mind. And given the hour delay, that's what causes me concern. Detective Sides, I mean, he questions Miranda and Brandon on the same day within hours of Benji passing for like maybe 30 minutes, an hour, and then never ask them another question again. Is that thorough investigation? He gets information after the autopsy that the bruises, why not call him back in there and go, hey, do you know how this happened? Do you know how that happened? When did he last eat? How much did he have? When did he last drink? These are very, very important questions that inquiring minds want to know. But if you don't know that there is an issue, the parents don't, I mean, at that point, they're under Brandon's distraught, you heard. He was distraught at the hospital. You're asking him about his child like that after his child just passed. He probably wasn't in his right state of mind to even be able to give the details, but nevertheless, you know, the state has all of that evidence. They could have brought that to you. They didn't. The fact that someone can't take or chooses not to take the stand cannot be considered against them, but their statements prior to that to police officers are not prevented from being admitted into evidence. But we can't admit them ourselves because they're considered hearsay when the defense does it. But the state, by law, under the rules of evidence, can get it in. There is no elephant. Remember we started with this and I said, if you think there's an elephant, you're going to find an elephant? Well, Dr. Molina, you know, Detective Sides comes to her and he's clipped out these videos of his timeline and what he thinks happens. And so he gets her off on this track of, oh yeah, it might be starvation. Let's go with that. Because here's the thing. The only thing that we've lost here is 2.2 pounds. And remember when we talked about the other case? That is the only other case in 20 years that had starvation. That child had 7.17 kilograms. The child was alive, it had expired in like immediately prior to the police involvement or after the police involvement. So we know that that child had almost half was about the same size and stature as Benji and 40. She knows Benji has starved to death. It doesn't make sense. And when she says that Benji's cachectic, while there are a spectrum of small little children, there is a very drastic difference, as you heard from Dr. Gebhardt, between a small child and a cachectic child. And Benji was not cachectic. No internal photos, so you just have to trust her. On this mesentery that she says is translucent, we were never given internal photos. She didn't take any. And she admitted you can't rule out suffocation, diabetes, arrhythmia through autopsy. Blunt force injuries, she said without adequate explanation. Again, that should have been looked into and asked of Miranda to see what was going on in that house. The labs. I pointed those out to you because she does not take beta hydroxate, butyrol, and the other one that are required in order to diagnose diabetes after we pass. And she also, the vitreous glucose levels, as you can see, open up in Defendant's Exhibit 33, open it up. And the lab itself tells you that if you don't preserve it, these labs cannot be relied on. Because you have to preserve it frozen, and it's only good up to 30 days. And they don't test it until after October 30th, which is 2.5 months later, and we have no idea if it ever got frozen before it went to the lab, because you're going to see that FedEx, and it's not indicating anywhere on there that it was frozen when it was shipped, and it was in shipment for 72 hours. So here again, the state has a burden of proof, and they can't rule out diabetes. Now, maybe it wasn't as likely, right? I'll give you that. But the thing is that because we don't have the evidence, we cannot then therefore jump to some type of starvation. Diabetes does result in weight loss very quickly, as you heard, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, the symptoms that he had. Most likely starvation. In her autopsy report, she doesn't say it's starvation. She says most likely. Well, the standard here is beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you're going to, by her own admission, the state could never even meet its burden because she can't rule out all these other things.
10 minutes.
Not dehydration. Lucifer, he had a height chart. He said, I only put down the ones I thought would be reliable. Well, interestingly enough, he doesn't put down Dr. Molina's. He instead finds it more reliable to put the one from 97 centimeters on it to make the height chart go up and then down. So I had him do that for you. If you have his dehydration, he speaks out of both sides of his mouth. He says the sodium is 159, so that shows dehydration. But when you look at the urine nitrogen, is low, and if it's high, it's dehydration, and if it's low, it's protein. So what he's saying is that uronitrogen says it's not dehydration, but he's already told you that there's dehydration. And then he tries to use that same number to claim that it's low protein. It doesn't make any sense, but he does admit that there's no stunning, and that he possibly died from diabetes.
The judge is a mischaracterization of that testimony.
Your Honor, it's quoted.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will remember the evidence is presented to you in court through the testimony of the witnesses. What the attorneys say is not evidence.
We do have some numbers. You can go look at those. The EMS was 300. The ER was 214 for the glucose level. The testimony stated that, at least according to the American Association of Diabetes, 200 is going to qualify you for diabetes. We had excessive thirst, excessive hunger, excessive urination, eating and still losing weight, vomiting, blurry vision. The blurry vision comes in when they're on 7/20/2021. Miranda is telling the officer that, and it doesn't catch most people's attention because nobody would think blurry vision at that stage would be associated with a medical condition. But she's identifying that on 7/20 that he's having a hard time seeing. Okay, causation. A person is criminally responsible if the result would not have occurred but for his conduct, operating either alone or concurrently with another cause, unless the concurrent cause was clearly sufficient to produce the result and the conduct of the actor is clearly insufficient. All right, here's what this really comes down to is that if Miranda's actions were sufficient in of themselves to cause the event, then Brandon cannot be held responsible for
Judge,
that.
that is a misstatement of that law. It's a misstatement.
Ladies and gentlemen, the law was given to you and is given to you in the charge of the court. The statements by the attorneys is not the law of the case unless it is in harmony or agreement with the charge of this court.
I'm going to keep moving, but you get my point, that if Miranda is doing something to Benji in that house, it is not, you cannot use that, the morning that he passes, you cannot use that to then say someone else is responsible for an act that she did in that house to Benji that may have resulted in his passing. Mistake of fact. Okay, here's the thing. If the parents mistakenly rely on the medical professionals after they told them what their concerns are, and they do everything that they've been told, they're allowed to rely on that mistake of fact, right? Because the medical professionals, they were relying on what the medical professionals told them to do. Also, if he believed, if you find from the evidence that he believed that Miranda was feeding Benji, or providing water to Benji while he was in his care, and he was mistaken about that, then that does not go against him, right? Because he did have evidence that the child was being fed and provided water while in Miranda's care. Housekeeping. Demonstrative evidence doesn't come in to go back with you. So that January 2019 date is on a demonstrative evidence on that chart. Jury unanimity. Each of you has a voice and you have a vote. And the reason we don't have one juror and we have 12 is because it's important that the collective body be able to discuss it, but at the end of the day, you have a right to your own individual vote, and you are asked by law to exercise your vote in line with your conscience and the charge of the court.
5 minutes.
If you're unable to decide, just understand that there's other jurors that would also be hearing, if we're unable to get to a unanimous vote, that while we would rather you have, we need you to vote your vote, but if it comes to that, we will retry the case, but those same the next jurors would have many of the same issues that you already have and are struggling with. So we do ask for you to take the time to really consider all of the issues. Passion, bias, and prejudice. I understand that child abuse cases can evoke a lot of passion and prejudice, but that doesn't mean it happened. That's why you're here to consider everything. And I'm going to ask you not just to make the argument for me because the state's going to get up and talk, but I'm asking you to make that argument for Benji. Because there's a lot of stuff that didn't get looked at, and that's his dad. And when you go look at that video from July 20th, you can tell that they love each other. This is not the type of situation in which Benji did not adore his dad, and his dad adored him. And I believe that you owe it to Benji to work as hard as you can to make the argument, because that's also someone that he loves. Precedent-setting case. Take your child to multiple doctor visits. Child loses 2 pounds. Child is having behavioral issues. You tell your child yes or no, and you're sitting here. This seems insane to me. We should all be scared, because it's not us or someone we know that has a kid that's really skinny. My brother had, both of my nieces are very tiny, but they're not starving, and neither was Benji. Be careful how we judge others, because when we judge others by that standard, we can expect to be judged ourselves. I am not saying that Brandon is a perfect parent, but what I'm saying is that the state has brought you no evidence that he was a cruel parent, or that he was a parent that intended in any way to deprive his child of everything he needed. Things do happen. Children do pass unexpectedly. 2 pounds is not something that you are sent to prison over after having already lost your child for something that you cannot explain. At the end of this, I believe that the only right verdict here is not guilty. And I'm asking for you to find Brandon Cervera Sr. not guilty.
State. Yes. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard argument, we have heard part of the arguments, we have not heard the full arguments, so please do not begin deliberations or discussions amongst yourselves.
All right, the jury